All right, we would be starting the training now. Good day, everyone. My name is Jumoke Odediji, the Program Assistant for Center for 21st Century Issues, an NGO responding to the challenges of the 21st century. I welcome you all to this capacity building training series, which will be holding monthly. This monthly capacity building training series is hosted by the Center for 21st Century Issues for the Committee of Practice platform and everyone to further engage with climate finance and the Green Climate Fund processes in Nigeria, and also to engage local women at the grassroots level on how to contribute to climate actions and also to get involved in GCF processes in Nigeria. I'll be moderating this training and I indulge your full participation in the training. Thank you. Shared on the screen is the agenda for today's training, which will be guiding us for the training outline and time management. Please note that all participants should introduce themselves using the chat box, and also a registration link would be sent, will be shared to the participants in the chat box for us all to fill. Thank you. Next on the agenda is an opening remark to be given by Ms. Titilope Akosa, who is the Executive Director for Center for 21st Century Issues. You're welcome, Ma.
Good morning.
All right.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Yeah, I thank you all for joining this capacity building meeting, because this is what we have all agreed to do in this new year, and we want to ensure that we start very well, and that's why we are not taking things for granted. So every month of this year, we'll be holding this interesting conversation with all of you. We need to deepen your understanding about climate finance and climate change and the Green Climate Fund itself, and what is the role of women, what can we contribute to climate actions, and how can we benefit from the climate finance streams coming into Nigeria. And it's also very important for us as members of the community of practice, or as those who are interested in climate finance, to understand what climate finance means. Not only that, it will also be very important for all of us to continue to push the advocacy for more financing to climate change, especially at the grassroots level, because that's where a lot of people face the brunt of the impacts of climate change. So I welcome you to this first and inaugural conversation on this climate finance platform. And I wish you that you will learn more and you will be able to use whatever you have learned to contribute to climate actions on the ground in Nigeria and even at the international levels. Thank you very much. You are all welcomed.
Thank you, Ma, for the opening remark. The next on the agenda is a presentation on the topic, understanding the concept of climate finance. All right, that is to be taken by Ms. Chima George, who is the Principal Consultant of Clean Finance. Ms. Chima George is an environmental and climate change expert with experience working with NGOs, government, and the academia. She has worked in a range of systems, conducting research and analysis, writing and stakeholder engagement with communities and government officials. She is the founder of Clean Finance Consulting, CFC, a knowledge think tank that conducts research on climate change and links projects to climate finance in Africa. CFC has worked with Nigerian parliamentarians in connecting them to organizations to build their capacity. Ms. George has spoken and presented technical papers at various conferences and meetings under the auspices of the United Nations, African Union, and United Cities and Local Governments of Africa on climate change and climate finance. She participated in an Oxfam George Climate Fellowship, where she presented to German parliamentarians, communities, and experts on the impact of climate change in Nigeria. She also contributed in 2 books, a section in Africa's journey in the UNFCCC negotiations as a consultant with the African Climate Policy Center, UN Economic Commission for Africa, and a chapter in climate change in Africa, in collaboration with Freie University Berlin. She just concluded working on the development of 6 agricultural climate risk profiles for Nigeria in collaboration with the International Center for Tropical Agriculture and the Nigeria Incentive-Based Risk Sharing System for Agricultural Lending. It is an honor to invite Ms. Chima George to deliver a presentation. You're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I will just be starting. I've sent the presentation. Please, can you share your screen?
Yes, I would share them. I'll share the screen now.
So I just did a very brief presentation because this was quite impromptu. I was contacted, was it yesterday or 2 days ago to present. And this is a very busy time for me, but because of Madam Titi Akusa, I just decided to do something. So maybe if there's going to be another session next month, I can continue from that and elaborate on climate finance, but this is just the basics I will just be giving. So are we ready?
Yes, we are. Can we all see my screen?
No, we can't. Let's see.
Oh, sorry. Can we see now? A minute, please. I'm trying to share my screen.
Who is here?
All right, can we see my screen now?
Yeah, we can see your screen, but it's the banner that we're seeing.
Is the banner we are
Close that, and you need to pick which particular tab you want, since you have many tabs open.
Okay. All right, what about now?
Yeah, now.
Yes.
Okay.
We can see understanding climate finance.
Yeah, thank you. You have the floor, ma.
Okay, so next slide. So why climate finance? So first of all, I didn't want to give the whole introduction of what climate and how it's impacting us. But now, let me give an example. In 2020, we had serious floods. Can we all mute our mics? So there's no. Okay, so in 2012, we had serious floods in Nigeria, and I think that is when, this is my own personal opinion, I think that's when the country took it seriously that climate change is real and climate change can affect us. We lost about $16 billion, million dollars from different oil and gas activities that were stopped. The economy lost so much money. We had so many people displaced, and this was result of not only climate change, we had incessant, that is continuous rainfall, but it was also because of the release of the dams. So we had excess water being released and we had a lot of rainfall, continuous rainfall. So that's what resulted in the floods of 2012. And this has been and this has been happening for many years, or for centuries. For 10 years plus, we've been having effects of climate change across the whole world. But as years go, as we keep progressing, we have the impacts increasing. So not only are we having flooding, we're having all sectors being affected by climate change. Please, can we make So we have different sectors being affected. For example, in agriculture now, we have slow onset of rain, we have drought, we have desertification, which is affecting agricultural productivity and affecting the amount of the income of farmers and the amount of food or agriculture that is harvested, and which is a major issue we're already facing in Nigeria. So why do we say climate finance? So developed countries have caused climate change of development of over 100 years and 150 years ago. They have caused climate change by their modes of development, which is the use of fossil fuels to develop their economies. Use of oil and gas for energy, mostly energy. This has caused an accumulation of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is now causing global warming and climate change. We have the glaciers melting, we have the temperatures increasing, we have weather just changing erratically. So we have erratic events. We just had the cyclone in Southern African countries recently, Cyclone Anna. So these are all the different effects and impacts that we're facing in Nigeria and Africa as a whole. Now, based on this, so with the UN and the UNFCCC, that's the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is the leading body on climate change activities and issues under the United Nations. All the countries came together to look for a solution. Now they've known of this issue since the 1970s. That is oil and gas industry that are the major pushers or causers of climate change through their their extraction and their different development technologies and matrices. So since the 1970s, there have been conversations from the Broadland Environment Convention. There have been conversations on climate change. And from 1992, a body was formed, the UNFCCC, and all countries came together. We have about 190 countries that are members. And as from those countries, we had a division. We had Annex 1 countries and Annex 2 countries. So Annex 1 countries are the developed countries and the major polluters that have caused climate change. So we talk of Japan, we talk of the US and Europe and Western countries. And the Annex 2 countries, apparently when this was started, China was part of Annex 2, Brazil was part of Annex 2, country. Those are the countries that are still emerging or developing and haven't been part of the historic climate change emissions in the atmosphere. So based on this treaty, all countries decided under the common but differentiated responsibilities. So common responsibility, we're all facing climate change and we all have a role to play, but differentiated, we did not cause climate change, so we cannot contribute financially to it. We are trying to develop, that is Africa and developing countries. We are trying to develop, so we need support to shift to cleaner ways of technology. We don't even have the means of, we're still trying to sort out our power issues. We're still trying to feed our nation. We're still trying to export, increase our GDP, education. So we are not developed. So we need those funding. And it was now agreed that developed countries will support developing countries with finance for climate-related issues. So when you talk about finance, you talk of finance for adaptation, for mitigation, and for capacity building. And now, luckily, at the last COP, we now have finance for loss and damage. Loss and damage means, okay, when these cyclones or when these disasters happen, what is the funding to cope with it? So this has been a, what's the word? This has been like a challenge, or there have been many deliberations about financing for loss and damage. And last year, we just saw progress. Hello, Jumo. So we just saw progress with funding for loss and damage. Loss and damage last year. There is no universal definition for climate finance, but they have this funding from national, bilateral, and international sources for adaptation and mitigation projects. Nigeria needs about 177 billion to transition to a low carbon economy and implement climate targets under the Paris Agreement. So on your screen now, we have a schematic of the global climate finance landscape. So these are all the different sources of climate finance. So there are various mechanisms through which the climate finance come. So we have the UNFCCC financial mechanism. So that's where you have the COP. You have the CDM market and the carbon market, which is CDM and joint initiative. Then under the COP, you have the GCF. The GCF is the Green Climate Fund, which is the financial mechanism, approved financial mechanism for the UNFCCC. We have the Adaptation Fund, we have the Global Environment Fund, we have the Least Development Countries Fund, and the Special Climate Change Fund for low-income countries under the UNFCCC mechanisms. Now, under the non-UNFCCC mechanisms, you now have UN organizations, you have multilateral development banks like the World Bank, the African Development Bank, European Bank, you have the Asian Development Bank, and you have also carbon finance, because there are two ways. Climate finance comes in different forms. It's now we call it blended finance. So when we say blended, because climate change is an issue we did not cost, there has been a lot of deliberation, and there has been a lot of push and advocacy from African countries and developing countries that we cannot collect loans for climate change or climate adaptation. So that has been a major advocacy the Global South has been pushing at the different negotiations. But because this is it's economies we're looking at, and there's always going to be business there, we have banks involved, then there are now two mechanisms. So you have the market-based mechanisms, which are business oriented, and you have non-market-based mechanisms. But even in the different portfolios of funds, there's always a blend. There's a blend. So now you have loans, you have concessional finance, you have grants. So it's not 100% grants, and I don't think there's ever been 100% grants for climate-related projects. So next slide. So if we divide climate change, so for example, the GCF as the Green Climate Fund and the financial mechanism for the UNFCCC is mandated to give climate financing 50% for adaptation and 50% for mitigation. Now, most organizations, most development partners all prefer to give climate finance for mitigation, because mitigation always comes in projects and there is return on the investment for the mitigation. But most adaptation projects do not have return on investment or are not necessarily business models. They are to cope with existing issues that are happening. So from time, most of the financing has always gone to mitigation than adaptation. So mitigation is an anthropogenic intervention to reduce the sources of CO2 or enhance sinks of greenhouse gases. So in this picture, we have renewable energy solutions. So that is one of, in fact, that is one sector that gets a lot of finance, climate finance. And because energy is a utility and it has to be paid for. So financiers are more willing to put their money into such projects because they can see a return. But remember, this is supposed to be support to developing countries because the global north is taking away our ability to develop in any way we want to develop, because now, because of climate change and because we're feeling the impact, we have to look at cleaner ways of developing. So we cannot use the same methodologies of gas flaring and, just fossil fuels to develop. We now have to have a mix, and we have to look for cleaner sources of development. The next slide, please. The next is adaptation. So adaptation refers to the ability of a system to adjust to climate change, moderate potential damage, and cope with the consequences. So this is like, I think this is Makoko community, is a community in Lagos that lives on water. So this is also like an adaptation mechanism. So when we have sea level rise or we have floods, these are island states or states that are close to major rivers or major oceans, like the Atlantic Ocean, for example, e.g. Lagos State, can look at such methodologies. Now, this is a bit, this is just an example. There are different, all types of flood defenses that countries can look at. For example, Lagos State has raised green bonds. Axis Bank has raised green bonds for Lagos State, and it's for flood defenses against their facilities. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we can see the landscape of climate finance. So we have about globally, we had about 574 billion went into climate finance. That was the total amount of climate finance across the whole world. And you can see on the left side, the sources and intermediaries, the instruments, the uses, and the sectors. If you see at the bottom right, you see renewable energy generation. Out of 579 billion, it had a share of $337 billion. You can also see mitigation in the middle. Mitigation is about 532. So most funders are all willing to give, in fact, it's not willing. Most of the climate finance goes to mitigation projects. And not only do they go to mitigation projects, most of them do not reach Africa. So it is stuck in different sections, Asia, or most of the climate finance that is gotten, the countries that give it, get it back. So climate finance does not even trickle down to developing countries that need it the most. Next slide, please. So like I've already said, I'm looking at the schematic. These are the different sources of climate finance. We have private capital, we have public sources. Public sources are countries, that's what we talk about bilateral. Then we have development bank instruments, and we have the carbon markets. So under the GCF, developed countries have committed to mobilize $100 billion every year till 2020. We're in 2022, not even 2021, and they have not reached their first 100 billion. They were supposed to mobilize 100 billion yearly, annually. We haven't reached our first 100 billion. So that shows that even if developed countries have caused climate change or are the main drivers of climate change, they are not even, they don't meet up their commitments on climate finance. Neither do they meet up their commitments on climate change and targets to reduce their emissions, to make sure that we're able to keep warming below or at 1.5 degrees Celsius, for it not to go up to 2 degrees Celsius or 3 degrees Celsius, because that will have more climate disasters. Nigeria is in the process of assessing the Green Climate Fund. We have the Development Bank of Nigeria, and we have NISAL trying to assess the GTF. 26 million has been approved for Nigeria and Ghana and Uganda under the Acumen Resilient Fund. So these are all the different types of funding, and these are some projects that have come to Nigeria. The Adaptation Fund is Adaptation Fund for adaptation, and a percentage of that fund, 2%, is used to fund a clean development mechanism. Now, the clean development mechanism is under the carbon market. It's just a means of, so it's like a cap and trade system whereby developed countries keep polluting and they now have credits for their production. Everybody has credits, and they have like a maximum they can trade these credits. Now, these credits are used to develop, what's it called? Climate sink projects in Africa or in developing countries. So for example, for their pollution, they can come to Nigeria and do either an afforestation project, or they can do an energy efficiency project with the funding that they use from their credits. So that is another means of funding under the Adaptation Fund. Next slide, please. So, like I was just talking about the carbon market, but we also have other innovative forms of financing. Now, outside more financing going to mitigation than adaptation, most of the climate finance also comes from private sector. So you have the multilateral banks, you have the pension funds, you have the asset managers. Most of the funding comes from the private sector. And they have brought up innovative means of raising finance for climate change. So we have things funding through the capital market. We have things like the green bonds. So the green bonds are debt issued from the capital markets. That's borrowing money from the capital market to implement projects and paying back over a period of time. So Nigeria has issued green bonds, and these are other countries across the world that have issued green bonds and carbon pricing. Next slide, please. So what is climate finance used for? Climate finance is used for energy efficiency, renewable energy, climate smart agriculture. So when we talk of climate smart agriculture, we're not talking of genetically modified products or GMOs. We're talking of smarter ways. We're talking of more efficient ways of utilizing and maximizing natural resources because of the stress and the strain that climate change is causing on resources. So if we're looking at irrigation, we can look at more sustainable ways of irrigation, such as drip irrigation, or we can even look at, instead of getting water, we can look at rainwater harvesting as a means of getting water, saving water from the rain for agriculture. Other projects are afforestation, agroforestry, energy efficient generators, recycling, waste minimization. So basically, projects, climate finance is used for anything that is that tends to reduce emissions, that is for climate change mitigation and adaptation, also for climate change capacity building, which is very important. So this event now is capacity building. I'm sure that there were some sponsors for it, like Both Ends, or previously, Center for 21st Century has had partnerships with Both Ends that have funded some of their projects. So that is climate finance for capacity building. So there are a plethora of projects that have gone on in Nigeria. Next slide. But this is just a few, very few. So we have the new map project supported by the World Bank to stop gully erosion, land degradation, and environmental insecurity. This has mostly been deployed in the Southeast, which has terrible issues of erosion. Then you also have different support from bilateral partners like DFID, that's the UK Development Agency. You have the UNDP. The UNDP has supported Nigerian government with projects. They also have the what's it called? They have the Jeff Small grant, which they've given to NGOs. They also have support for negotiations, policy capacity building, youth, and now the NDCs. We also have the green bond. Nigeria has issued, Nigeria was one of the first African to issue sovereign green bonds, that is government green bonds. They've issued two. They are looking towards issuing their third green bond, and we have the private sector come on board and issue green bonds. We have issued. We also have North-South Power issuing green bonds for hydro projects. And thank you very much. That is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ma, for the wonderful presentation. I believe we've been impacted on climate finance and the processes in Nigeria. Thank you so much. Now we'll be moving to the questions and comments section. So to the participants, please, if you have questions or comments, please kindly raise your hand in the box so that I can unmute you to ask you questions. Thank you.
So you took their number so that we can keep following up. To follow that person. Wow.
Please kindly raise your hand so that I can unmute you to ask your question or pass your comment on the presentation. Thank you. We are still waiting for those that have questions for our speaker or comments on the presentation made.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Jomala Dede. Thank you, Chima, for that wonderful presentation. Yes, my question is how do you assess the engagement of civil society organizations in Nigeria concerning the climate finance, or how do you assess the participation of CSOs working in the area of climate change, agriculture in Nigeria, or let me say in Southwest, as regards climate finance? Do you think that the NGOs are participating fully? What's your assessment of that?
Yes, NGOs are participating fully. Any money you get for any environmental project that either reduces what's it called, greenhouse gas emissions, or improve capacity to cope with climate change is climate finance. Like I said, what we're doing now is this capacity building session we're having is a climate finance project for capacity building. I don't know if this particular webinar is being funded, but I know that Center for 21st Century has gotten funding from both ends for previous capacity building sessions such as this. So it is very easy to access climate finance. A lot of NGOs are in the forefront of accessing climate finance in Nigeria. In fact, in Nigeria, if you look at the people that are more aware of climate change issues, this is my personal opinion also. Correct me if you have, if I'm wrong, or if you have other views, are the CSOs. The CSOs are more engaged in these processes than the private sector. The private sector is just coming on board. The government has known about this, but the government is, there are a lot of political issues, but CSO assess climate finance. So the first thing you need to ask is, what is your project? What project are you working on? When you look at the project you're working on, what companies support this project? They could be local companies, they could be, what's it called, international companies. So for example, if you're working in agriculture, you should be looking at, okay, are you going to talk to banks? What banks, what are their CSR? What particular areas do they finance? That's for banks, but you will look at international organizations. Oxfam, for example, is very big on agriculture. They fund a lot of things in agriculture. So Oxfam is an international NGO. They are a partner you can look at. There's IFAD. IFAD is also is a fund, so they also fund agriculture. So they're different. So the first thing you need to do is, what are you working on, and what are the organizations, or who are the organizations that work in this sector? Outside that, you also have embassies, you have bilaterals. That's different countries. Different countries have different funds. You have German with you have German Development Aid, GIZ. You have the EU. They also send out calls for funding when they have projects or areas, whether they need consultants, they need NGOs to do research, or they want to do a project in an area. They send out calls for they call for expressions. So you can always, if you follow different sources, you will know. So the second slide I shared, if you look at it, those are all the organizations. So that's the whole schematic of the climate financing, what's it called, architecture. So if you look at it, some of them are acronyms. I can share the second slide with explanation of what these acronyms are. So if you look at those organizations, do your research and be checking them one by one. You see which one works in Nigeria, you see what kind of fund they give, you see which area they give it to, and you see which kind of organization. But the good thing is that now all climate finance is geared towards there has to be gender mainstreaming in climate finance applications or assessing climate finance. So if you want to assess climate finance and you don't have a gender component to do gender mainstreaming, it's harder. So it's now easier to assess, or rather it's a requirement to assess for gender mainstreaming to assess climate finance. So I think the first thing you need to do is to check that whole schematic and look at the organizations that work in Nigeria, look at the different funds they have, and then you can reach out to me, or you can reach out to Titi Akosa to support in putting an application together. I know that Madam Titi has received funds even from the GEF Global Environment Facility under the UNDP Small Grants. So she has been a recipient of climate finance. Other NGOs have also been recipients of climate finance.
Thank you, Ma. Any other question or comment? Please signify if you have questions or comments. All right. If there is no question or comment, we'll be moving to the next on the agenda, which is closing. And that will be done by Mr. Alao Abiodun. You have the floor, sir.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yes, thank you very much. Let me quickly thank our facilitator, the principal consultant for climate finance, Chima George, for taking us through the wonderful presentation on the understanding the concept of climate finance, especially as it relates to our campaign in the organization here. We have a hashtag which is called Women for Climate Finance and Advocacy, which we have been pushing since last year at COP26 in Glasgow. And going forward, we will be pushing out that campaign consistently all through the year. And so we want to appreciate our facilitator for giving our participants here today from various spheres Today we have two distinct participants. First, those from the Committee of Practice platform that we have been engaging over the months, and we also have those who are just new persons joining us to participate in this capacity building training. So going forward, this capacity building training will be held monthly and it will be held virtually, and we'll be bringing series of speakers who are not just thoroughbred, but they also have in-depth understanding about climate finance. So we want to appreciate our facilitator once again, and we look forward to having her more in other subsequent engagement. And so for those who are asking for the slides, we'll try and make it available for you all. We'll ask the speaker to help us make it available. So we want to thank you all, and also thank the executive director of the organization, who is also present here with us, Ms. Titlope Ngozi Akusa. So thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you all in other subsequent engagements.
Thank you, Mr. Alao. Please kindly fill the attendance form via the link shared in the chat box. Then we can share the presentation via email to all participants. Thank you. This is the end of the first edition of the capacity building training, and subsequently we will be having the monthly training. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, and good night.
Thank you. Bye.